presence this morning. I'm joined by my colleagues, Nuri Martinez and Paul Krikorian. And let me just also acknowledge the General Manager from Economic and Workforce Development, Jan Perry, is with us, and we'll be hearing from Mrs. Perry later in the meeting. Members, without any objection, though, we're going to move items 2 through 6 and 8 on consent. And we will approve the CAO's report, items 7 and 8. And with that, Mr. Secretary, would you call the first item?
Item number 1 is a discussion relative to community-based economic development and recommendations for nonprofits on improving our local economy.
Great. Well, again, I want to thank you all for being here today and being a part of this important discussion. We're finally emerging out of some difficult financial times, and I think many of us see the financial recovery on the way, but it's certainly not there yet. As we speak today, it's projected that we're going to have a $250 million shortfall, and so we still have some work to do. The challenging times require us to think out of the box and do some things differently. And I hope today the discussion will help illuminate some new ideas, some different approaches in job creation, business development, encouraging entrepreneurs, things that we need to do to help move our economy forward. So nearly half of the City Council being freshman members, I think it's a good time to begin thinking of ways to enhance and even change the way that we do business, trying to figure out some better ways to achieve that. And that's something I think is very key in revitalizing our city. And I think we have to really draw upon the nonprofit community more than we have. Nonprofits have been on the ground, providing jobs, providing technical assistance, providing housing, education, a range of issues that impact economic development. In the 9th, there's almost a shadow government of nonprofits that have been very effective working with our community-based agencies and organizations. Nonprofits, I think, are an essential part of our city's economic development strategy, and we should take advantage of that. So I think the timing for today's dialogue couldn't be better. The 2020 committee is going to be making some reports to the city soon. In fact, I think we've got a press conference tomorrow. We are in the midst now of beginning the budget discussions and deliberations for fiscal year 14-15. And so I think this is a timely opportunity to have some discussion, raise some issues, and put some things on the table. With that, invite my colleagues to make any comments before we move to the panel. Any? Okay, with that, let's again, everyone's comments are important and valuable. If you haven't filled out a card, please do so. We're going to have some comments from a number of nonprofit organizations that have expressed an interest, but again, everyone is invited to fill out cards and to chime in. So without further ado, let's invite the first panel up. Representative from Vermont Slauson, EDC, All People's Community Center. Please come forward. Brother Crusade. Don't be bashful. St. John's Wellness Center. Anybody from St. John's here yet? Challenger Boys Club. LA Metropolitan Churches. Not here yet? Okay. Nuevo South. LA's Promise. All right. Well, we'll be joined by others later. So why don't we begin, Marva, just again, identify yourself, the organization, and your comments, please.
Ladies first? Good afternoon. I'm Marva Smith Battle Bay, President of Vermont Slauson Economic Development Corporation. We've been in existence now for over 30 years, brought about by I guess, the foresight of Mayor Tom Bradley and Gil Lindsay. They were the two elected officials that looked down in South LA and decided they needed to have an economic development corporation in the Vermont Slauson community. So we've been there ever since. And of course, we've done a lot of work in economic development. We've built 6 grocery stores. We've developed 2 shopping centers. We've done a number of affordable housing projects, and we also own industrial property that we use for incubator space for businesses. Today, though, really I think the 2020 report put forth a very compelling case about what needs to, or what all the problems are. And of course, all of us here could have the same pity party and talk about what's wrong with our communities. But we also want to talk about what can happen in the community, the hope and the opportunity that also is in the community. Just a couple of quick comments. You know, of course, too many of our residents in the city live in poverty. Home ownership today is probably out of reach for many of the people who live in my neighborhood. And there was something in the LA Times last Friday that said the median income is lower today than it was in 2007. So if that statistic is correct, that is very problematic. There is also a great need, particularly in the African American and Latino neighborhoods. Nationally, 13.1% of African Americans were without jobs at the end of 2013, compared to 6.5% of whites and 9.1% of Latinos. So nationally, both African Americans and Latinos lost economic ground relative to whites. And this disparity can also be seen in our communities, particularly in South LA. Just a couple things I want to talk about that I think we can do and continue to do. I think it's the last year and a half that the city really invested in something called Business Source and looked at trying to have a targeted, expansive approach towards businesses. It's the first time in really 30 years the city has done anything like that. The city has had so many different small programs where they've thrown a small amount of money into some of the problem areas. And with that, we couldn't do very much. With the Business Source, I think we're going to be able to do a lot more work in terms of assisting businesses to grow and to develop because of the need in our community. I can think of one, and our area is very large. When I say South LA, really, I go all the way to the airport. Okay, I go past the 10 freeway. I go all the way to Alameda. So it's a very large area to service. But there was a restaurant I used to eat at when I left the airport all the time called a Yara Thai. That's in Westchester. Well, having eaten there many times, got to know the owners, we were able to help them with a $1.2 million loan to buy the building next door and to expand their restaurant next door. So now they'll have a noodle bar and they have products that they'll have for sale. 33 jobs created in the last year alone. But that's not the only opportunity. We've also worked with a small retailer with a $5,000 loan to help buy merchandise so that she could get the necessary fixtures in her store and keep her small community-based store growing. Okay. So we work with businesses that are very small to even large businesses. But what I want to see more of, I hear a lot about the Promise Zone, and I wasn't very happy yesterday when I read the article about the Promise Zone, but I'd like to see something like an Opportunity Zone. Promise is not a word in our community we like very much anyway, unless you're in church. If you're in church, we'll take those promises. Outside of that, it's like a dream deferred. So I think an opportunity zone that tries to bring to bear a lot of the resources, not only from the city, but how about talking to some of the foundations? Going back to look at the study that said that African-American-led organizations and minority-led organizations really receive less foundation support than majority-led organizations. There's a UCLA report out there that talks about how today the social service agencies in the city really do the work of the city. And we're tremendously underfunded. But there's a way I think civic leadership can step forward and help us to work with the foundations. Transit-oriented development is a very necessary piece of our puzzle. It works in affluent neighborhoods. It has not worked in poor neighborhoods. You can go to Slauson and the freeway. Parking lot sitting there, you wouldn't dare leave a car there. When they originally built, DOT put that lane, what is that, Diamond Lane, it went straight through our community. You couldn't get on or off the lane in our community. You had to get off past Century, and you had to get off downtown. So there was no opportunity. That's changed because they had that bus line recently go through 5 years ago, and so now there's one at least at USC. But I think transit-oriented development is going to be a great opportunity for us, and let's see if we can make that happen in our community so we can also be the beneficiary of what I hope to see, a better, more economically prosperous city of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Marva.
Oh, wait a minute. Just one last thing, one last comment.
Okay.
One of the things that I want to see us do a lot more work with, too, is to some way help to continue to coordinate workforce and business source. Because WorkSource deals with the businesses that have to put people to work. Well, we work with the businesses that hire people, okay? So if we can provide services to those people, we can help them employ more people. And we need to see if we can make a better disconnect. And right now, a lot of our WorkSource jobs are going outside of our neighborhood. They're not even in our neighborhood. So people are getting jobs, but they're traveling further to get those jobs. So I'd like to see some coordination between WorkSource and BusinessSource.
Thank you. Mr. Weaver.
Well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. I'm going to keep my discussion very focused, but I'm going to piggyback on this concept of WorkSource and BusinessSource. In doing so, I would like to first of all share a real quick story. We've been fortunate to work with a number of young men who are coming out of the probation system, who are still on probation and then trying to get that second chance. And what's interesting, as I sit in these courtrooms, and the judge says to the young person, "Now get out there and get a job and don't do this again." And then the probation officer says to this young person, "Get out there and get a job and don't do this again." And then I take this young person home, and this young person, first of all, has an education that's less than a third grade academic proficiency level. Second of all, has one pair of clothes that you would even consider wearing to an interview. Third, lives in a house there. If you ever had that stench of when crack has been smoked too much, it's nauseating. It's about 5 minutes and you become sick to your stomach. But that's the home that we're walking into. And fourth of all, has absolutely no business skills and no one out there offering those skills. Yet, the expectation is, okay, get away from your life and go out there and get a job. And so they said, well, you know what, I'm going to go over here to one of these centers, and I'm going to try to get this job. And these centers, and unfortunately, given the skill sets, the mannerisms, the socialization that these young people have had, instead of the assistance that they're looking for, they oftentimes get kind of turned out the door. It's a bad look for us over here. One of the things that the city did this past a year and a half ago, which I commend them for incredibly, is changing the youth source system. And saying we're going to start working with those out of school youth, as opposed to working with the in-school youth who are easy to work with and easy to put through training. That was phenomenal. It scared a lot of people, though, because that's hard work. That's real work. But those individuals who embraced it are making differences in lives of young people who have never heretofore had that opportunity. Here's the rub. Now that we're doing that, we also have the summer hire program, which is fantastic, with the exception of a couple of things that I'd like to help with, at least suggest some ideas about. Right now, the way our system works, a young person applies online and then randomly is selected. Now, once they're randomly selected, they're in regardless of what they do. And so I'll give you an example of a couple of young people that we had to place. I said, look, we would rather just train this young person, for the entirety of the time that they're funded, because they need that much training. They said, well, no, they can only get a couple of hours of training, then they need to go to to the work field. And so we had a couple of young people assigned to like a Ross department store. They got there, the employer said, okay, what I want you to do is stack, take these clothes off the hanger and stack them on the shelf. And they said, you do that. I ain't doing that. Why do you think I'm here? And they proceeded to talk on their phone for the entire time. The next day, the employer came back and said, take them. I don't care what happens to them. I don't want to see them again. But also that employer, who everyone worked so hard to connect, that employer that everyone worked so hard to get to be a part of this program, says, I don't want to be a part of this program if that's what you're going to send me. And so we have to recognize that the young people who are in that area, who do require that level of support, if we can't make sure that they receive that level of support, it doesn't matter how many jobs we identify for them. It doesn't matter how many opportunities we identify for them, because they're not going to be able to take advantage of that. And this is a huge challenge that we're facing, and something that we definitely need to ensure that we address. In that, I would like for us to consider how we recruit our young people, especially those who are at the margins, especially those who need opportunity. One of the things I think that we've been able to help identify is in working with these young people. About 5 years ago, we said, you know what? We need to have a conduit. We need to have a process for them to be able to succeed. And so we created a program called the Junior Executive Program. Didn't even have any funding for it, and we just created the program. We knew that they had to get these skills. They had to have these opportunities. As a result of that Junior Executive Program, we were able to put in employment opportunities, in stepwise employment opportunities, and in training opportunities that led to employment, over 1,100 young people into these spaces. We weren't a youth resource center at that time. We weren't a workforce development center at that time. We were just an organization, a 46-year-old organization, who knew that we had to do better for our young people, and we couldn't just expect them to somehow go to high school and then come and then all of a sudden be ready for work, especially given the opportunities that they've had when they were attending high schools that were in the bottom 10 percentile in the state and some of the worst schools in the country, that no one was providing these types of opportunities. And if we didn't step up and do it, then they wouldn't have those opportunities. They would go to a job, as many of them did, and they said, well, they wouldn't hire me. And they said, well, let's talk about those tattoos on your face that say, get the F out my face. Let's talk about the fact that you walked in there with your pants down to your knees. Let's talk about the fact that you had a perception. They said, well, I can dress like this. I have a right. Yes, you do. But the employer also has a right not to have you represent them. And until someone said, this is what we're going to do to make sure that our young people are appropriate and ready for the opportunity, they weren't getting those opportunities. And that's why our employment rates for our 14 to 24-year-olds were so high, remain so high, but yet we are now making changes because there's a couple of people who cared. What we need, though, is we need those changes to be systematically made. We need to understand this from a larger level, a larger perspective. It can't be one or two or three or four organizations. We really need this to be part of the system and the fabric. And so that's our request for consideration, is that we look at how we prepare our young people for success in their careers and in their lives.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mario Chavez. I'm the Director of Community Relations with St. John's Well Child and Family Center. We're a federally qualified health center with 10 clinics from South LA through Lincoln Heights. And we provide 175,000 patient visits a year in our 10 clinics. We serve very underserved communities where there's limited access to healthcare, South LA. Community of over 1 million people without an emergency room. So we do see people of all walks of life. And one of the things we're very proud of, and that we actually wanted to highlight today, was our partnership with Augustus Hawkins High School. Our clinic is a firm believer in fair wages and developing the future generation of workers. We just announced a month ago that we were going to raise our minimum wage to $15 an hour beginning next year for all of our employees at our clinic. Doesn't matter if they're janitors or security officers. All of our employees will be making $15 an hour, and we've also set a career track program in place, like a linked learning program with Augustus Hawkins, where we have 27 interns that have been partnering with us for the last 3 months that are now interning, shadowing our chief financial officer, shadowing our director of human relations, and getting real life work experience. Part of the challenge that they face coming out of high school a lot of times is that in our communities there are very, very limited numbers of jobs. Usually the unemployment rate in South LA hovers at about 1.5 to 2 times the rate throughout the county of unemployment. So when our young folks that are very bright and very talented get out into the workforce, a lot of times they get out there without any work experience that's going to give them the edge to actually get a job, and then they have to travel further distances to actually seek employment in their communities. So what we're trying to do is advocate for more investment in young people. Part of economic development is investing in the future, is investing in the future industries, which right now we're seeing a huge need of doctors. With healthcare reform, we've seen an explosion of visits, 1,000 visits per week this year at our clinics. So with that comes more need for bilingual doctors, bilingual staff, and we're having a very hard time filling those positions right now. So what we're advocating for is more investment. Obviously, economic development is tied to the future workforce, and what we're advocating for is more investment in our youth programs that help us ensure that our communities are producing productive members of society, and that we're sending them out there with the skills and the support necessary to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any comments? Yeah, let me just, first of all, thank you all for your testimony. And certainly one theme I think is clear is, focus on job creation, job development, job prep, and job placement programs. And sort of reference was made to the Workforce Center and the Business Source Centers. And I'm pleased, I think, under this administration, there seems to be a better coordination of these two programs. And we look forward, in fact, to a report back on the workforce centers in this committee. But you're absolutely right. There has to be better coordination, better cooperation if we're delivering the services in a seamless way. And so, again, we appreciate your service, appreciate your comments, and thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's have our next panel up. Challenger Boys Club, LA's Promise. And Partners in Care Foundation. Morning.
Morning.
Like to begin?
I'm Arna Fulcher, and I'm the Senior Director of Finance for Partners in Care Foundation, here with June Simmons.
I'm June Simmons, Partners in Care Foundation CEO. We work closely with a number of agencies across the city, including the Department of Aging and many of the health services providers. We do a lot to strengthen the work of other agencies, but we also do a lot in the area of job preparation. We worked under the Community Development Block Grant funds, and we're glad that there's attention being given to trying to retain a substitute support for that, because it serves as a powerful match for us to bring in a variety of other funding sources into the region that allow us to create new workforce and healthy workers. We do a lot with the graduate schools, all 6 graduate schools of social work in the region. We're leading a system that has trained over 400 to address the fact that this is the second largest aging population in the country. We have over 650,000 people over 65 here in the city of Los Angeles. It represents both health hazards and great opportunities for intergenerational support. A lot of families can't work without healthy grandparents to really help them stay in the workforce. We're working a great deal with the Veterans Administration and other veteran-serving agencies. We've brought in AmeriCorps funding to recruit and bring veterans in a graduated manner back into the workforce to build work skills so that they become part of a whole movement that's being led through our agency, the State Department of Aging and the City Department of Aging, to equip peer leaders to assist a range of our population that have been hit by ethnic health disparities and the epidemic of chronic conditions that can threaten people's ability to gain jobs and to keep jobs. And there are a lot of evidence-based programs now that are being rolled out that assist people in preventing the worst of the worst. It's hard to get and keep a job if you have diabetes and lose your leg. All preventable kinds of circumstances that self-management can really avert. So we do a great deal to recruit people to lead these kinds of activities, to create new jobs for them, and to create and retain a healthy workforce for the jobs that are available. Health reform is bringing dramatic change. As you know, the duals demonstration is en route. In covered California, we have 500,000 individuals in our region that are coming under insurance, and we've been working very hard to help those health plans to bring new benefits, which will create new jobs for a whole host of new folks that we are bringing skills for, who will deal with people's ability to manage their own health in a safer manner, to either avoid chronic conditions like diabetes, hypertension, managing asthma, or to manage the worst of those if they do get those. But this creates a great many new jobs, helping people who are leaving the hospital to avoid bouncing back in, advancing the new agenda that will come as Martin Luther King Hospital gets up to speed and its campus rolls out. So we're partnering all across the city to advance these new agendas that we think bring important new job opportunities and a healthier workforce. But we also think that an investment in nonprofit leadership like this across the agencies is a very important source of match that allows us to leverage those funds, much as Medi-Cal draws federal dollars. Some of these private investments from the city help us bring other private dollars to the table to really scale up this work across the region.
Now, are you also finding a shortage of healthcare professionals?
Yes, but we are mostly interested in other factors. Health reform is an opportunity to address health outcomes. It's a move from volume to value, from piecework to really health outcomes. And a lot of what drives that is not new and better medicine, although that is important. There are social drivers, there are environmental drivers, and there are self-management drivers. And there's a lot of evidence now that shows that these are critical to successful population health management. So we're working with a lot of the public hospitals and the private hospitals, the physician groups and the health plans to build new approaches that will help people to retain and recover health. And a lot of those are social workers, gerontologists, community health workers, health coaches, but they can also be returning medics. They can be less fancy health professional degrees, so there's a tremendous role. Promotores, a whole host of individuals who now volunteer their time who can be employed in these new kinds of programs. So we think it's empowering to them as well as those they serve.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Corey Dantzler, the President and CEO of Challengers Boys and Girls Club in South Los Angeles. It's my honor to be here today representing just close to 45 years of being in service and providing a positive alternative to youth in South LA. Challengers was started by my father, Lou Dantzler, with 12 kids in the back of a truck in 1968, and now we serve over 2,200 boys and girls with after school and programs as well. I remember being a kid and going to the club and waiting to turn 14 so I can obtain my first job at Challengers through the Summer Youth Employment Program. And to see a youth at 14 years old be able to obtain employment, to see that look on that individual's face was really meaningful. And I know what it meant to me to be able to now be a part of the workforce, and that there were city programs that pretty much invested into youth. Our club is about prevention. And, there's a lot of other opportunities and programs out there that take kids in, that may be in gangs or doing some other types of things. And we want to be able to get the kids before they get to that. And what we've noticed is one of the things that does that is youth employment. And we were able to have that program for many years. But since then, that program has gone away. But what it has done for us, really, is that when we go and look for grant opportunities for the youth in the club, we always make sure that we write in youth employment to make sure that they have an opportunity to obtain jobs. And we just don't give them jobs. We make sure that they go through training. They learn how to interview, how to fill out an application and a resume, because we want to make sure they have a good foundation for going forward out into the workforce. And for someone who is 14 years old through the age of 18, it's important to be able to give them that foundation so they do know how to go out and present themselves, so they do know how to go out and look at someone in the eye and speak to them. So I think what we're looking for really is just that reinvestment into youth. And now, since those programs are not available to our youth anymore, we can provide that, but at a very small amount. At one time we were providing close to 25 to 40 youth with jobs in the summertime. Now we can only do between 5 to 10 because we just simply need the assistance and help in order to do that. Because we look at it as an investment into our youth. We don't want just funding to be thrown at things and hope that it's going to stick. We want to be able to develop those relationships and make sure that those youth have an opportunity. Because when they don't, and they stop coming to our facility or feel like there's no one who is investing in them, then they're going to go out and they're going to look for other things to do. And 9 times out of 10, that's not going to be positive, and they may be doing some things that, quite frankly, would be detriment not just to themselves but also to others as well. And I look at this also as, if you look at our organization started by my dad in 1968, and then to be able to obtain a building, 22,000 square foot building that was an old abandoned Vons supermarket, and now a 52,000 square foot building and take up a city block. And a lot of that was for people like Gilbert Lindsay, Mayor Tom Bradley, Jan Perry, others who have invested and continue to invest in Challengers, and I would encourage to look at that and still do so for the betterment of the youth of South LA. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Good afternoon. My name is Veronica Melvin. I'm the president of LA's Promise, and we are a not-for-profit that operates in South Los Angeles. We partner with LA Unified to transform some of the traditionally underperforming schools in the region. We currently work at Manual Arts High School, at West Adams High School, and at John Muir Middle School. We serve approximately 5,000 students across those 3 schools. And briefly, just to tell you a little bit about our outcomes, and then I'll talk more about some of the trends that we see in our experience in working with the schools and the youth and the families. We've turned Manual Arts High School, which had been deemed one of the 5% of lowest performing schools in the nations, that had produced 50% that was part of the contribution to the 50% of the nation's dropout, into a school that just this past year exceeded the district's average 4-year cohort graduation rate. It hit 70% of its 9th graders that finish 4 years later, which is a huge accomplishment, as well as at West Adams, an 80% cohort graduation rate. So we've really seen success when we've been very strategic and coordinated, when we have directed resources towards specific results. We're certain to set measurable and accountable goals for ourselves to make certain that we get the outcomes that people entrust us to achieve, given the resources that they dedicated and the expectations that we all had for our schools, our students, our teachers, and our youth. One of the trends that we see in terms of what's needed in South Los Angeles in terms of schools is we need coordinated pre-K through post-secondary experiences for our schools to be successful. We can't have schools that are, we can't have a kid coming into kindergarten without having a preschool experience. It just doesn't work. We know far too well that research indicates that the achievement gap starts from the days of infancy, actually before that baby is even born, in terms of the amount of verbal interaction the mother and the adults and family members have with that young person. And so we know that that is sealed by the age of 2, and it's realized and usually first documented in 3rd grade reading levels, and by 3rd grade reading levels and 4th grade math, we know which students are going to achieve in high school. And so we really must be coordinated and strategic in early interventions and in terms of preschool and making certain that we have a high quality early learning experience for all youth. Those early elementary grades need to be coordinated to a supportive environment in the middle school years, where we see students come with decent 5th grade or 6th grade learning outcomes and usually plummet in those middle school years because of the diversification of the content they're learning, the challenges that English learners have, and the inability to grasp some more cognitive learning concepts such as algebra. So we really need to be strategic in what we're doing in those middle school years to prepare students for success in high school. We also know that we need to meet students' unique learning needs in South Los Angeles. Much of that is something that can be characterized by students that have significant barriers to learning that are usually caused by poverty. There's challenges in terms of students' immigration status. There's challenges in terms of our inability as a school system to effectively address the needs of English language learners, basic health needs that students face, as well as mental health needs. We have a very coordinated mental health system at our schools, and I think that's one of the solutions that we need to consider is the coordination of resources on a school campus, something called Integrated Student Services or community schools that we've embraced at Manual Arts High School. We recently hosted visitors from the White House that at the end of the visit said that every school should have the coordinated and in-depth resources at its school site, like Manual Arts, and many of the people here talking today function at our school site, and we're happy to call them partners. But at a place like Manual Arts, 1/3 of the students on that campus receive one-on-one counseling with mental health providers through both school district provided staff, school staff, as well as partner agencies and interns from USC. That's a huge population of students that every day need supports in order to function and be focused in their academics. The other factors that we find to contribute to students' success is the parental involvement and awareness. Just the fact that we need parents to be supportive to their students showing up for school every day. The attendance rate in our schools are dramatically lower than what we would like to see, what we want to see, and what are the district averages. So we have intentional attendance campaigns. You've probably heard a lot about the anti-suspension movement that's taken afoot about how we make certain that we're not suspending kids for minor infractions, and really trying to create a positive environment and culture on those campuses, and working with the teachers, working with the staff, and working with students to understand that it's better to keep them in class learning rather than suspending them or taking them out of classroom. And that's a big movement that we've seen the district undergo in the last few years. They've dropped their suspension events from 60,000 to 10,000 at Manual Arts. We've seen an 85% decrease in suspension events. This year we're at 24 suspensions for the year, which is pretty unheard of for a large comprehensive high school. And we know that we have to approach it differently in South LA than you do in other parts of town, and I think that's a unique approach that every school system and regions needs to look at. With all of these topics that I talk about, we have coordinated distinct services to address the unique needs, either from an academic perspective, from a health perspective, mental health, from student supports in terms of enrichment and leadership. We also do a ton of work around exposure to college and supporting students to apply to college. Our schools have set what we call a mandatory requirement for students to apply to at least one college and complete the financial aid forms to go. We can't enforce that, but we do our best to ensure that they're supported in doing so. And one of the things that we find is when we're helping and assisting students on their application and then they have to look at the enrichment, if they have not done an enrichment opportunity at the school site or at a club nearby, they have nothing on their resume for enrichment and leadership opportunities. So we know that the services that we're all providing in the community at the school site are essential, not just to make certain that they're staying engaged in positive after-school activities or summer activities, but they're also essential to post-secondary success and lifelong success. And that's the third area that I'd just like to hit on. It's essential that we're really seeing our education system and the experiences that happen after school or to be coordinated with linked learning or longer post-secondary opportunities, and it gets to that jobs theme that you've heard about. It's about ensuring that kids are exposed to positive post-secondary experiences and put on paths, given mentors, given internships, given career learning opportunities that support their successful trajectory. I'm not certain if you guys heard, but yesterday President Obama announced the award of $7 million of funds to LA Unified, specifically around linked learning, and I was happy to see that both Augustus Hawkins and Manual Arts are the recipients of some of those fundings. I know that right now they're deliberating in California with the Department of Ed over additional funds to come, kind of the same type of linked learning funding. It'd be great if we can support that application so more funding can come to Los Angeles. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Members, any thoughts? A common theme here, obviously, is education and health. And again, they are both two important components in economic development, community economic development. We appreciate your testimony, your comments, and your service. Thank you. Okay, we've got another panel. LA Metropolitan Churches, Rise Financial Services. And let me also invite up the LA Chamber of Commerce and CD Tech. Right on time.
God is good.
Okay, Ms. Branch, would you care to start?
Yes, thank you, Councilman, for hosting this meeting, first of all, and thank you for taking several meetings over the past few months with the Los Angeles Metropolitan Churches, which has been in business in South LA for the past 16 years, and we focus on those neighborhood, small to mid-sized congregations in South LA. With less than 150 members. So I only brought a few points today, given the 2-minute time limit, and just to kind of jump the conversation from our perspective, we do want to encourage you and the rest of the members here to be bold and take action on innovative and new approaches in community economic development, especially in neighborhoods like South Los Angeles, which have so many other factors, which you heard somebody say on the panel before me, impacting and guiding our priority setting as it relates to revitalization and jobs. So I think innovation and new ideas are very appropriate for today. We think that one of those solutions includes involving churches and faith-based organizations. In South LA, that's a strategy the city has tried many times, and it's worked very well. You've gotten something out of that over the years, but we think we could also expand a little, add more business development activities. We've done quite well in housing, low-income housing and different types of housing with faith-based organizations, and you probably know who some of those groups are, but we need some job creation activities, so small business development and diversifying that city relationship with churches, we believe, is a good priority and will also bring you some very measurable returns and results. We also like the idea of the vending, different types of vending, not just food vending, but non-food merchandise and any other types of self-employment, sole proprietor activities that you can get behind and launch and innovate in South LA will be really helpful, especially given the types of demographic profile that exists in some of our most stressed and neglected neighborhoods. So vending is something that we support, and we want to recognize your committee, yourself, your office for taking some leadership on that, but we need more. I believe it went to a committee and we haven't heard a report back, so it would be nice to get a timeline and an update on that committee analysis. In any way that we can provide some support to the city, to your department, we would like to do that. And then lastly, around looking at new ways to involve churches in economic development, One of the things I think that's been missing, we haven't really talked about and defined what is faith-based community economic development. Like, what is that? I'm not getting a lot of resistance on the idea in general, but different ways it can happen. So what we've done, and we could use more support, we need to inventory more of our churches so we can have a sharper picture and put some dollar amounts behind assets. Believe it or not, even with all the foreclosures and other economic challenges, we still have a number of churches, a very healthy number, that own and have equity that we could begin to do some real estate and job creation, small business, mixed-use type projects in South LA. And if you do the job creation and vending, we're looking at those adults that hard to employ, even if they go through some of our very best job training, job creation, educational programs, health improvements and access. Just the way that we define positive income today has changed. A lot of folks won't have the same W-2 employment opportunities, and those jobs just aren't coming back anymore. That's what we're telling our church, just like many of them are sitting in these large edifices and beautiful buildings and underutilized real estate. They're not coming back, and they think that they're going to come back. So we've got to reimagine all these things and try something new and innovative, and that's what I came here to ask you to consider today. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your help and your leadership on that issue. In terms of the vending, I think the CLA is going to be coming back to this committee within another 3 or 4 weeks with that report. So we're on track, and certainly will keep you posted as that discussion moves forward.
Thank you.
RISE.
RISE Financial Pathways. Thank you, Mr. Councilman. I'm Faresi Hogan Rolls, President and CEO of RISE Financial Pathways. We rebranded about 6 months ago from Community Financial Resource Center. So I'm going to use that just to give you a summary of where we are as an organization. We are now in our 21st year. We're the first public-private partnership between the banks, the community, and the city of LA. It was actually started as an initiative under Mayor Bradley shortly before the riots actually happened in 1992, and there was a mass exodus of banks from South LA, and to respond to those unmet credit needs, there was this move to get the banks to agree to start doing some investments and commitments into South LA and other low-income communities. Well, once that happened, there wasn't anything that really went from that, but there was a large report. Well, then the riots came in April, and then shortly thereafter that report was useful, and Community Financial Resource Center was started in October of 1992, and it opened its doors in March 93. So we since rebranded, partially because the shrinkage of the banking community has forced us to look at other alternatives in terms of fundraising, and I don't need to tell you that almost every nonprofit is having challenges raising money, particularly since the global economic crisis. I call it the debacle. But, you know, when you look at what happened in 2008 and the banks got a bailout, and most of our nonprofits not only did not get a bailout, but we also started to get more and more requests, more and more demands on our time and on our services, and we haven't, I don't think a lot of us have turned the corner since then. I keep advocating in my own way with our funders and partners that we have to come together and not be divided and conquered by this constant barrage of news media that says go to the nonprofit can do it, because we can only do it in partnership with our public sector partners. And so that's what I come to ask, is that we look at what kinds of public-private partnerships can we do again? How can the city lead that charge? There were dollars that were available to most of us before the debacle happened. I remember getting called into a room, and I'm sure a lot of people here were in that room as well, where we were told just at the drop of a hat, by the way, there's not going to be any more CDBG grant money available, and if you don't have bricks and mortar, you're not going to get anything, you got to go figure it out. And we walked away trying to figure it out, scratching our heads. Well, since then, there was also Section 108 money that we could use in order to get loans on the street. Well, we haven't seen that either. And so, you know, when you look at some of the contracts that used to be available, they're not available anymore. So there's a lot of, I'll say, dried streams, where there used to be streams of dollars that nonprofits could access. And now with the shrinkage, and I know that people say, oh, it's easy to partner and you can partner with so-and-so, but to be honest about it, it's always a little difficult to partner with somebody down the street when and their services are just a little different, and maybe they do things just a little differently, you'll find that most nonprofits don't partner that often. It's rare, actually, even though it's talked about a lot. So I just want to encourage you to reconsider how we use some of the city's funding. There are tax bases there. There's gross receipts income. You know, I don't even know what's going on with that, the bag tax, you know, the grocery store tax. Is my pet peeve. But, you know, we pay for a bag if we don't have a bag. Where does that money really go? I think it goes straight to the grocery store's bottom line. So let me wrap with this, because I think that's some money that could actually go to help fund nonprofits. I thought, you know, I've been trying to think about this because as a nonprofit director since 1990. I've been through some ebbs and flows and ups and downs and valleys and peaks. And, you know, the money seems to be always coming from somewhere. In particular, I know that the Community Reinvestment Act has been very effective at getting the banks to put money places. I think one of the main reasons why we don't see a Community Reinvestment Act for insurance companies and oil companies is because they've watched what's happened to the banking industry. They don't want to be involved. Their lobbyists are very strong, and as a result, we don't see that. However, as I continue to follow the dollars in Los Angeles, the oil companies continue to post huge profits. The insurance companies continue to post huge profits. Insurance companies are mandatory for us. So why not have some sort of CRA that's real, that helps them to understand that they have to put money into the communities where they're taking it from? So I know that there's some work being done around that with Greenlining Institute. I was at a conference just about 3 months ago where the insurance commissioner is actually looking at that. I would hope that in Los Angeles, since we have a base of some large insurance companies, certainly they have some are even headquartered here, that conversation can start, because I recognize that maybe the city doesn't have it all, but, you know, as a nonprofit community, we have to have some sort of income stream that would allow us to do our jobs and do it well. Just as an organization, and I'll wrap up, we focus on, I know I didn't even say this, we focus on small business development, microfinance. We're part of the street vending, food vending partnership that the California Endowment funded. A few years ago, we were the first organization to be funded as an economic development group by the health-based foundation, because we focused on food vending, and that's what we've been working on. And so we're happy to have worked with Councilman Price's office on that, and, you know, really to expand the opportunities to create jobs. Over time, our organization has created over 3,000 jobs. We've lent directly $10.1 million in microloans, which is a high number for the kinds of loans that we do. And we also help with we deliver financial education. And the final thing I want to say is that the financial education is so critical. We are the Bank on Los Angeles access site for South LA. The average family spends over $700 on fees just for cashing checks and regular banking services. We've been advocating a long time as an industry to get some sort of regulation around predatory lending. But in our community in particular, there's a proliferation of predatory lenders, which cuts right into a family's really their money for food and housing and so forth, because the majority of families that live in parts of the 9th and parts of the 8th are actually very low income. And so there's 9 census tracts that are 9 zip code tracts that are very low income. And so when you look at that and you look at their ability to move from that poverty level, they're seeking services not only from a nonprofit but also from the city and the county. And how do we rectify that without looking at how the money's being spent, how the infrastructure is working, and how do we as an organization help to get people up and running through some of those micro-lending activities. And that's what I would ask, is that you guys think about how we can partner greater by getting more money into our nonprofit community. We do job creation, that's our focus. We don't do social services, but the loans that we make and the jobs that we create last for 5 to 10 years, and we've been able to track that because we've been around for, I hope you're okay, we've been around for 21 years. We are part of the IDA national study. There are 2 organizations being studied right now for Congress through the Office of OCS, Office of Community Services. We are one of them. The reason they selected us is because we had such a strong portfolio of individual development accounts, wealth creation accounts, for poor people to come and start saving money for 18 to 24 months. They can take that savings, get a 1 to 2 match from us. So they save $1,000, they get $2,000. They can do 3 things. They can go back to school, they can start a micro business, or they can purchase a home. So we have a lot of track record of people that have actually gone back to school or gone and started a micro business. And so we'll know about the completion of that study. It's a random study of 500 IDA clients. We'll know within the next 18 months. So we're halfway through that study right now. But it will report back to Congress whether or not IDA should become a permanent part of the federal budget. So I'm pleased to say that LA was selected as one, but I'm also disappointed that it had to be LA because we had enough poverty level in order to access that number. So anyway, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your willingness to hear this because I think it's critical that our nonprofit community is supported in a way that allows us to continue our work and grow our work to meet the demand. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Tina Hussein. I'm here representing the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce and our 1,600 members employing 700,000 people throughout the region. And first, I want to encourage and applaud your focus on identifying recommendations from nonprofits today to improve the Los Angeles economy. The LA Chamber is a nonprofit that has focused for 125 years on doing just that. More recently, we have been very actively involved and supportive of the 2020 Commission's deliberation on challenges and opportunities for, facing Los Angeles. And I've submitted to the clerk today a document for each of you that contains the LA Chamber's recommendations to inform the 2020 Commission's deliberations in addition or in ahead of its second report, which will be focused on economic solutions to propel our economic development for the city. We have in this document 4 pages of recommendations, so I don't want to go into too much detail on everything. I just want to highlight that in order to identify these recommendations, we talked very extensively with our member companies to understand their real barriers to job creation and to understand the opportunities that they see for the city to take in order to create jobs and grow our businesses. So as you can see, our findings and recommendations from these discussions cover issues across the board, everything from business tax reform to workforce development to supporting our robust entertainment industry. We believe the recommendations that we have shared with you today and with the Commission can also inform the City Council's discussions and actions on these matters. We look forward to opportunities to engage with each of your offices to make these thoughtful recommendations a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. CD Tech.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Benjamin Torres. I'm president and CEO of CD Tech. We've been around since 1995. Organization was started by Dr. Denise Fairchild, a well-known and respected leader in the area of community and economic development. And so we're here to just provide some information that we think is critical, both for the citywide and then specifically as it relates to South Los Angeles. CD Tech is a community and economic development organization that really tries to figure out the relationship between civic engagement and leadership development and economic transformation of communities. And we think that specifically in South Los Angeles, we're at a very critical juncture. We've never seen this type of investment historically from private money. And it's an opportunity, it's a short window, and we want to make sure that South Los Angeles continues to start on Washington and doesn't start on Slauson. And so the reason for that is we want to make sure that we have investment in infrastructure and human capital in the area. We are also members of Unidad Coalition and also a proud member of the CD9 Coalition, which was created exactly to begin to change the narrative, which is that nonprofits can't seem to work together. We're trying to change that story. We're trying to create a story of opportunity, a story of that there is high need, but there's also high capacity in South Los Angeles in particular. And by working together across sectors, from service providers all the way to community organizing groups, to small businesses and neighborhood councils, we feel we have a good pulse of what is needed in the area. I want to partner with city government to make sure we can develop the policy that's going to change and transform the game, because we don't believe that you can service your way out of this poverty situation. We need to really build and invest in leadership and human capital and create the type of investments in the area that lead to localized entrepreneurship and development on the ground. We are very fortunate that we have 5 major universities, 9 community colleges, and and many hospitals, and looking at them as anchor institutions for procurement contracts, employment training, pipelining folks into career pathways. That's something we need to explore in a much better and more detailed way. There's no reason why we couldn't have universities provide a certain percentage of the local vending to local community-based businesses in the area that would just generate an entire sense of job creation, strengthen the economic landscape and business corridors of areas like South Los Angeles in particular. The big concern for us is building power. We need to build civic efficacy. We need people to be engaged at multiple levels, and we need to democratize the city again. And so we believe that by working with our community partners, providing a lot of civic engagement opportunities, looking at public service as a career pathway. I think that we talk a lot about jobs, and we always think business, but the public sector, the nonprofit sector, provides a lot of jobs in low-income neighborhoods, as we're hearing today. And so if anything, if the investment should be made in transforming communities, it should be through the nonprofit sector in many ways. So investing in our local folks who are the most disenfranchised, the most disconnected, teaching them, pipelining them into public service career academies and skills, like we have at LA Trade Tech in the community planning program, for example, as a way to expose people to learn health careers, to learn about public service, to learn about community development, to learn about violence prevention, to learn about nonprofit service delivery, youth transformation and leadership opportunities. Those kind of pipelines are the kind of pipelines that young people can connect with. And it leads into very well-paying career opportunities whereby while they transform their own lives, they're transforming the lives of communities around them. So the issue of building leadership and power tied to economic opportunity is tremendously critical for us. And once again, talking about changing the landscape economically, social entrepreneurship, work owner cooperatives, small micro businesses, that is the way of the future for South Los Angeles if we want to connect disengaged people into economic opportunity. Traditional methods have not provided enough evidence, in our opinion, to show that things are changing to move the needle and move people out of poverty. We need to look at alternative systems like they have in the Bay Area, like they have in Oakland, like they have in San Francisco, like they have in Cleveland, in areas that are just as much, or if not more, economically impacted, like Los Angeles. We can learn from these other examples and bring those methods and bring those methodologies into South LA and create a pipeline into investment where you get banks and other financial institutions as well as foundations who want to see the value in the relationship of double and triple bottom line opportunities. People are willing in South LA to make a difference. You have people who are the most disenfranchised, from Latino immigrants who are undocumented to U.S.-born Latinos to African-American young folks, all wanting to be part of the solution of transforming their communities. And what I've been told by a lot of investors is that, I've always thought it was an issue of lack of investment, and what I'm hearing from a lot of investors is there's a lack of entrepreneurship going on. And so we want to change that narrative and create opportunities and synergy by which people say, let's look at how do we build a business that also brings a much valued need into South Los Angeles. So we're looking at building a social enterprise that brings health juice stores into South Los Angeles as a way for young people to learn about leadership and health, how health could transform economics in a community, how do you bring important needs into an area and tie it into redevelopment projects that are taking place all over the boundaries of South Los Angeles. So it's a double bottom line. The community gets something, the young folks who have been disengaged from opportunities learn about employment, they learn about small business development, they learn about a leadership, and in this case a health sector, and they're able to then do outreach and try and transform the lives of other people around them while bringing something that's missing in the area. So we think that tied with transit-oriented development is critical. So economics that are tied to the investments that the city does have resources to provide support around is going to be important. And we cannot forget housing. Housing creates jobs, it stabilizes areas, and by housing I'm talking about affordable housing, that people are allowed to stay in the area. We're in a very interesting time in South LA, and I think this report says it, that the city is going to be a city for only certain people unless we actively do something about it. And so for us, it's important that we tie redevelopment projects and big anchor institutions that have the resources that are looking to expand to make sure that we generate opportunities for local folks, from local job hiring to permanent job hiring and training, et cetera. So these, and then the last thing I'll mention, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, career pipelines. The career pathways that everybody's mentioned earlier, linked learning is a tremendous opportunity to get people college and career ready. I just want to make sure that the emphasis on that is also placed in public service, because not everybody is going to be a doctor or an attorney, and not everybody's going to do construction work. There's, it seems like there's always these extremes. It's either STEM or construction jobs, and like there's nothing in between. And so we want to make sure that areas like health, community development, youth development, and those types of opportunities are part of that pathway and linked learning opportunity. I guess with that, I'll end my comments.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Your comments. Members, any questions? Just want to thank the panel for your testimony. Appreciate your insight and for your community commitment.
Thank you.
And we do look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next panel, Franco Vega, Sid Markishan, Aldo Medina, and Stuart Walden. Okay, and I'm told I've got to adhere to the 2-minute time rule, so I appreciate your
Good to go.
cooperation.
Okay.
Okay, 2.5 minutes. Stuart, why don't you begin?
I got a lot. Okay. Stuart Waldman, I'm president of the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, VICA. We represent businesses in the San Fernando Valley. 387 businesses who've created over 125,000 jobs. Every year, we put a poll to our members and ask them for their top 10 issues that are concerning them in business. And every year, the gross receipts tax comes back as the #1 issue. By 80%, it is a significant impact on business. Now, there is no one issue that you're going to address that will be the be-all, end-all in creating jobs. But the gross receipts tax is grossly unfair. Every business pays it, whether they make money or not. There's a proposal that's being talked about with a 15-year elimination on this, a phase-out that starts around, well, we'll find out in a couple days, starts around $30 million first year, $60 million next year. There's a 5-year stop on this. We'd like to see it happen, and it affects all businesses. The most important thing that you can do is create a job. Population growth has not kept up with job growth. By allowing businesses, by sending them the message that LA is open for business, you will get people who will start to look at Los Angeles to create a business, to open a business. I dream of a day when we have so many jobs that we have people moving to Los Angeles because there are so many jobs here, rather than leaving Los Angeles. I dream of a day when I get a phone call from somebody who wants to move their business from Burbank or Glendale or Calabasas into the city of Los Angeles, instead of getting calls from people who are in the city of Los Angeles who want to move to those other areas. There are many things that can be done. Let's see. I got a whole list, and I don't have a lot of time. Transit-oriented development.
Summarize that list for us.
Yes. Transit-oriented development, extremely important. We completely support it. The Orange Line is a perfect example, which we'd like to see converted to light rail. But the zoning around the Orange Line was not taken care of, even on the extension on Canoga, changed to encourage transit-oriented development. So if there is anyone who wants to build on the Orange Line, they would have to go through the process. So we'd like to see that taken care of ahead of time during any changes. Let's see. Film credits. Jobs that are created by the entertainment industry are incredibly high paying. They mean a lot, and while we are supporting, and I know the council supports film credits at the state level, I'd like to see film credits at the local level. This is something I can tell you my house is used for commercials and pilots and movies. I'm often in competition with Santa Clarita. So when a business films in Santa Clarita and they're not filming in Los Angeles, you're not getting anything. So I'd like to see something like that. Planning. We need to make a more efficient planning process. We need to make it so that businesses can come and build in Los Angeles. Councilmember Krikorian has an area that was in his old part of the district where Home Depot wanted to build. And unfortunately, that site lays dormant right now. Home Depot, I spoke to their national vice president on bringing new Home Depots into cities, and Los Angeles is not even on the map. They don't even consider Los Angeles viable to build a new Home Depot. Let's see. I'm good.
All right. Thank you. And thank you for your brevity.
Remember that.
All right. Aldo.
Yeah. So my name is Aldo Medina. Thank you. I'm from the East LA Community Corporation. I am the Commercial Corridor Coordinator. And I have just two recommendations after reading the 2020 Commission's report. The first one is the tremendous opportunity to tap into the large informal economy in LA, which is the approval of the motion to legalize street vending, which will bring out thousands of local micro-entrepreneurs from the shadows and create a space where we can invest in local small business development. My second recommendation is the city should invest more into the backbone of our economy, which are the small businesses. The Commercial Corridor project, which I am a part of, is on First Street in Boyle Heights, and I work to organize the small businesses in that specific region. And the organizing actually supplements the technical assistance from the Small Business Source Center. And yeah, that partnership with them increases the success of the individual businesses and the local economy. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Franco Vega. I'm the Executive Director of Right Way Foundation. I'm here representing South LA Homeless Stay and Foster Care Collaborative. I know that's long. You guys should hate to see the initials. What I'm here to talk about is jobs for foster care youth in South LA. I always say we deal with the best of the worst. The best surviving kids in the world grew up in the worst situation in the world. And we want to fight for living wage jobs. We're the only ones, I'm an orphan myself, we're the only ones that we can't work at $10 an hour. You can't pay rent at $10 an hour. You know, once the support of transitional housing runs out, kids are on their own and they have to live on their own. You hear funny people saying, well, how come they can't go back to their family? And they just lost the point that they're in the foster care system. And so we want to fight for more living wage jobs. The summer jobs program is coming. 10,000 jobs is coming. So we're hosting an event May 3rd at USC, demanding 300 to go to foster care. But that's just a Band-Aid. That doesn't, after the summer jobs program is over, you know, our kids going to feel a little bit better, but they have no other job. And so how do they continue to pay rent? I want to piggyback off of what Mr. Weaver from Brotherhood said. You know, he is right when he made the point about the youth going to Ross and not working. And we have a lot of those, but our philosophy is that's a mental issue. You know, we need to motivate our kids better, our youth better. You know, I'm a survivor. Our work source centers and our youth source centers aren't developed to work with this hardcore population. And it shows. And I'm just going to give one example. One of our youth we wanted to enroll in the Worksource Center, and they were 10 minutes late. First meeting, 10 minutes late, because he had to get on 4 buses and had to deal with some emotional issues from his family trying to come back in his life. And then that Worksource Center turned him away, you know. And then they used the excuse that we're trying to teach them better of how to hold a job. So what if he has 10 minutes for a job? I'm like, no, I've been to council meetings when some of you guys are 10 minutes late. You know, so do we stop the meeting? No. We provide the services. And so we want to really push for Youth Source Center, Work Source Center to really look at their model to work with this hard population. It is a hard population. And I want to piggyback off of Benny Torres said, social enterprise is the way. We sent 3 youth to a T-shirt training program in Cerritos that we paid for out of our pocket because a Work Source Center didn't have it on their iTrain list. So we had to pay over $1,000. And this is a good program that taught Homeboys Industry how to do their T-shirt business. And they graduated from that program, and it's been a month now when we're trying to secure some money to start the business, social enterprise for them. But let me point out how they're already going to shops trying to create contracts amongst themselves. And so, you know, our kids does have an entrepreneurial spirit, and we want to focus in on that. And that's why I'm here, just to say we just need to create a better youth source, work source center just for our hard barrier population. And that's all. And thank you guys for your time.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your comments. We do appreciate it. Okay, our last panel, Sid Arcusian, Malcolm Carson, and Nona Randos. Sid, why don't you begin? Okay, why don't you begin? Somebody begin.
Good morning, sorry.
Morning.
Good afternoon. Nona Randwa from the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles. We provide legal assistance to many low-income people throughout Los Angeles as the frontline law firm for low-income people. We're celebrating our 85th anniversary this year, and we're founded out of USC, so we have long ties with Los Angeles and South LA in particular. We provide one special part of our work is providing legal assistance to organizations that are implementing community economic development projects, nonprofits, small businesses, cooperatives, and social enterprises. And you've heard from many of our clients and partners already today. We have worked with folks who have advocated for and implemented programs that have protected existing affordable housing, including rent-controlled units and expired subsidies. We've worked on programs that create affordable housing. We've worked to encourage local hiring and hiring of targeted disadvantaged individuals, such as those who are long-term unemployed, lack educational credentials, or are returning from the criminal justice system. We've worked on programs to ensure that jobs pay a family-supporting wage and have decent benefits that can keep people off of public benefit programs. We've worked on connecting local residents to industry sectors that provide good jobs through job training, first source hiring, and other sector intermediary programs. We've worked to support and encourage local small businesses through small business lending, technical assistance, and local procurement programs, and worked on projects to create green space, healthy food outlets, and other programs to promote health. We've seen that many nonprofits and other small businesses have been successful in these types of programs to stem the tide of displacement in gentrifying neighborhoods, as well as creating opportunities for low-income residents of Los Angeles and South Los Angeles in particular. We've seen successes through projects such as the USC Development Plan, the Staples CBA Community Benefits Agreement, the Lorenzo Community Benefits Agreement, the Wiggins Settlement, the Community Redevelopment Agency Affordable Housing and Construction Career Policies, the Department of Public Works Project Labor Agreement, and many others. And we're working with a number of nonprofits who are working to translate each one of these victories into longer-term policies, particularly through the South and Southeast LA Community Plan process. We're really at a critical juncture right now as the city embarks on a number of significant planning efforts, including community plan updates, health and mobility elements, a comprehensive revision of the zoning code, and increased economic development along the Expo line. These represent crucial opportunities to take the lessons and victories that have been achieved by close collaboration with nonprofits and integrate them into a long-term comprehensive vision for our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Sid Maksudian, and I'm an advocate and I guess one-man nonprofit individual who's trying to help a certain sector of a District 14, which is the Jewelry Center. As you all know, that the Jewelry Center, it's a very vital, important sector of the economy in South Los Angeles. Is this that almost 30 years ago, there was non-existence when the Bullock's department store basically went out of business, and that particular sector of that properties were basically going to be dormant. It got rescued by a group of Armenian Americans who put large investments in that area to develop it. And so we could proudly call today that St. Vincent Jewelry Center is one of the world's #1 largest jewelry center in the world. With their expertise and with their coming together as an Armenian-American entrepreneurs, they developed it over 25 to 30 years, where we have right now, as we see, that flourishes. One of our concerns was that there was an alley, which was a street that's called St. Vincent Court, which is in the back of or in the middle of the St. Vincent Alley. Now, this large block of business center, basically it's owned, majority of it, by Armenian American entrepreneurs. Part of it, very couple of buildings, are owned by different entities. And of course, we have the theater. Economically, it is very vital that I heard my predecessors over here are talking about larger issues than mine. But the impact of this particular real estate and this alley has huge consequences, where today that we are talking about recovery and we're talking about making lives better. Here we do have a sample, at least a small sample, where this particular real estate has generated hundreds of, if not thousands of employment, tax revenues, and businesses are thriving. And yet, somehow, this particular businesses, which are 12 of them, which I represent, which are the restaurants and the building owners, we are at an impasse that, I guess, with the blessing, I'm assuming, with District 14 and one individual, which is the Dalijani Delson Investments, to trying to destroy this vital artery, which is very important for economic developments and contribution, tax revenues, employment, and extended families who those businesses employ. And over a year and 2 months, I've continuously came in front of you all at the council meetings, and I've progressed enormously to get this thing done. My hope is that because of Mr. Huiza, Mr. Paul Krikoria, Mr. Price, your section is also close to our district also. And of course, Ms. Martinez's district is farther, but there's a lot of constituents who live amongst all of your districts. I urge this panel to find a way to talk amongst yourself that how is it possible when there is a good thing going and yet we are somehow destroying it. We need better thinking outside the box
All right.
to help us to save these businesses. And I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for all the comments. I just want to thank all the speakers that participated in this conversation and others. I think it's been very helpful. Lots of good points made, encouraging better cooperation and coordination between the workforce centers, the business source centers, the role that health reform is playing in our economic development, the unique role that youth and education play in providing a foundation. Certainly our faith-based communities, the need for a bit more public-private partnerships, concerns about predatory lending, social enterprise, affordable housing, TOD, a number of interrelated topics. And I just want to let you know that we appreciate the feedback, the information. We certainly will be passing these on to the 2020 committee. Many of you will have an opportunity to make comments there as well. Certainly it's on the radar screen as we begin budget deliberations. And again, your comments, your thoughts, your ideas, suggestions, greatly appreciated in that process. Members, any other comments? Okay, we're going to move on. Let me just clarify, we did approve items 7 and 10 in CAO's report. And if there's no discussion, members, on item 11, you'll approve that as well. Okay, we'll approve the city attorney ordinance dated April 3rd, 2014. And with that, let's move to item 9.
Pardon me, Mr. Chair. Pardon me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Richard Williams, City Clerk's Office. Just for clarification, on item number 11, there is a city attorney report and ordinance. This committee, it's recommended this committee approve the most recent ordinance and note and file the previous ordinance and the reports from the Convention Center Department.
Okay, without objection, we will note and file as item 11.
Item number 9 is an Economic and Workforce Development Department report in response to motion Huizar Cedillo relative to an accounting of revenues and projected revenues, along with recommendations for the use of former Community Redevelopment Agency of the City of Los Angeles funds for economic development in former CRA project areas.
Okay, we're pleased to welcome to the table Director of Economic Workforce Development, Honorable Jan Perry, who's no stranger to these quarters. Mrs. Perry, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and to all of the committee members. Thank you for this opportunity. I believe you've each received a copy of a report, the Economic Development Committee dated April the 7th, 2014. It is a transmittal and starts with the basis for program development strategy. As we head into this year's budget season, I've provided an outline of what city policy makers can consider and using future tax funds that come back to our city in our effort to meet our economic development challenges. Now, we anticipate that the city will receive approximately $30 million in an annual basis, and so it is likely that as policymakers, you're going to have to make some decisions on how to allocate these resources. Of course, you have to face the ongoing concerns regarding the budget deficit, and I'm sure that that will weigh heavily on your decisions. And at the same time, many of the conversations that either I have had or my staff has had with your offices, I know each one of you is very anxious to see projects built or completed in your districts and for major projects that will provide the city with much-needed net new revenue for city services. As a department, we are moving forward to establish an economic development program that will provide a baseline of funding to deliver real economic development strategy for the city. For example, setting aside boomerang funds could be done with the same formula and fashion that the redevelopment agency used in the past, approximately 80% for economic development and public infrastructure programs and 20% for affordable housing. Now, our department's goal is to ensure that every dollar that we use from these funds would be leveraged and matched with grants and private investment. It's also our goal to provide economic development strategy and activities in a very on-the-record and reliable and transparent manner. We are working proactively with city departments already and policy makers and working to help develop the strategy for a nonprofit entity to deliver asset management functions, best practices, and to validate the economic development goals of the city and implement the work plan for marketing the city to business and vice versa. It is also the department's intention to work very closely with the Housing Community Investment Department to maximize mixed-use opportunities in transit corridor developments and in a manner that will help the city achieve its goals and the goals that it has set forth in the consolidated plan that ultimately you will approve. Program funds could be focused on asset management, capital projects, marketing, market investment, and of course, innovative projects. And the details of that are outlined in your transmittal. Specifics include management and disposition of city-owned properties, including those that have been returned to the city as part of the redevelopment agency, to maximize our strategic potential of transit-oriented development. For example, just to give you an example, major projects like the Convention Center project and analysis of future development site opportunities. In addition, capital projects would include infrastructure, facilities, and amenities that strengthen the city's economic position. Some examples, again, include projects that could be considered very quickly for funding, like high-speed citywide internet, technology related to that, the coordination of resources for Great Streets projects, a focus on tourism infrastructure in areas of the city designated for entertainment, cultural opportunities, cultural uses, for example. We are in the process of completing the procurement of our work source centers, which will be sector-based work source centers with a very good geographic spread. And once that appeal process has been exhausted, we should be able to announce that. But they will be focused on emerging job sector training. So it's important as we continue our development of human resource programs for our workforce that we give consideration to that effort of economic development and job creation and how those two intersect with the goals that we've established for our work source centers. Our economic strategy includes plans for sector and job growth throughout the city. We've offered some examples of immediate projects for consideration in the transmittal, but just to summarize, some of them include the Made in LA concept, real estate advisory services that can be provided by working with local businesses, professional organizations, chamber organizations to retain, to locate, and grow businesses, small and large, in our city, to collaborate with the Business Improvement District Group out of the city clerk's office to encourage economic growth and stability, and of course help to implement the recommendations that have been made to improve access to healthy food, and to create a guide and a marketing tool for all local communities throughout the city. We can use boomerang funds by combining them with bonds, low interest loans, new market tax credits, service repayment loans, infrastructure improvements can be achieved through that in the former redevelopment areas, and we can also use those monies for business retention and development purposes. Now, some of these programs are active in the city, and projects can be considered from small to large for loan consideration. And a small business would be considered 20 employees or less. Large would be obviously more than 20. And just as an example for your consideration, facade improvements or capital equipment investments. So we would like to, EWDD would like to develop a managed pipeline to prioritize projects based on project financing, project readiness and solid financing, and to ensure that all these projects meet obligations tied to public financing, like job creation and training, with a focus on living wage employment opportunities for our program participants. We already have programs like the Industrial Incentive Program for investing in building rehabilitation, remediation, capital equipment purchases, and public improvements. We also manage the Section 108 loan portfolio, and we administer a portion of the city's block grant program, and we provide small business loans from $50,000 to $450,000. The small business loan program does not offer revolving lines of credit, but secured term loans of 3 to 10 years. I, as the general manager of the Economic and Workforce Development Department, sit on the board of the Los Angeles Development Fund that allocates the new market tax credits, and we are hopeful in the upcoming fiscal year that we will have $100 million in new market tax credits to award. And as we move forward towards our budget season and hope to be able to have our requests fulfilled, we are working to expand the department's reach to all communities, business associations, chambers, and those who are interested in working with us. We have also increased our outreach utilizing social media to promote our programs on the WorkSource side of the department. Now, I think that people who are willing to invest and develop want certainty in their negotiations and agreements with the city. We want jobs and we want new revenue. So establishing a fund for economic development activities and defining our focus and having our delivery system up and running is essential to our success. And I have included in your transmittal the update on fiscal year 2014 to 2015 EWDD budget requests. So as we work to build the economic development side of the house at EWDD, I appreciate your interest in our department and the work that we'll do together. The report offers a number of economic development activities that we envision being undertaken by the department. And of course, you'll be considering a proposal in the near future. I believe that the CAO and the CLA are working on in conjunction with the mayor's office regarding a nonprofit entity in the future. Whether it is the mayor's office, the nonprofit, or a combination thereof, along with the Economic and Workforce Development Department, there is a need for personnel to be able to carry out and move forward on these projects and these initiatives. So given that we have great challenges and a great desire to build capacity for this department to help you with your projects and to move forward so we can bring in new revenue, I look forward to helping you achieve your goals.
Thank you, Madam Executive Director. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Thank you, Ms. Perry, for being here, and thank you for coming out to my district. And we spent a couple of hours together. I appreciate that. God, this is an uncomfortable mic. The CRA had sold a significant number of tax-exempt bonds in project areas in Pacoima and Panorama City. Do you know how much is available in Panorama City and the Pacoima project areas and bonds?
Actually, I don't know off the top of my head, but I can get you an answer. I can get you an answer by tomorrow.
My question is that, so when we find that out, will they be transferred to the city, or will the CRA refund these bonds? That's basically my.
This is just a guess, but they'll come back from the state to the city, and the limitation will be that they should be spent back in the former redevelopment areas.
That's where I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Panorama City being,
I
being in my
understand.
district, and Pacoima as a neighboring community, and Council Member Felipe Fuentes' district. And then I had another question. We just approved a major subsidy for the Westfield Shopping Center at Topanga Plaza. What types of policies do we have in place when providing these types of subsidies? And the reason I ask is, should we require a dollar-to-dollar match to invest in challenging communities? So right now, currently we subsidize up to 50% of the project tax revenue to very specific sites. Should we start thinking about maybe we do 25% and then, wait and commit the rest of the 25% if they come into challenging communities? I mean, I was listening to the panel, and everyone who spoke, I know their work, and they represent very challenging areas. And so I just want to know that we want to attract good types of developments into some of these challenging areas. I just want to make sure the subsidies make sense. They should be going to areas where they're needed.
I think first you have to start with the underwriting criteria so that people, when they go into an area, or if somebody's putting together a deal, whether it's commercial, residential, industrial, or mixed use, they know what the requirements are going in, what the city will ask of them, and the requirements will reflect the goals of the city, a living wage, workforce housing, low to moderate income housing, neighborhood retail on site, and of course the biggest of all, job creation, and what the multiplier effect of that is. I don't know if you'd want to tie yourself down to a strict formula. It could be something with parameters. Given the subject matter, job creation, what types of jobs are you looking for, given what's going on in the census tract. Every census tract has something different in it. Some have, assets more than others, and you have some significant challenges out there in your industrial activities. And so I don't know if I'd tie yourself down so much. I think I'd look more in what are you trying to achieve, and what funding instruments there are for you to leverage, and how that would apply to whatever direction you want to move your district in.
Well, that was a very significant subsidy, so.
Yeah.
That's a.
Any other questions? Okay.
I'm looking forward to examining this in greater detail. It's a very dense report with a lot of strong recommendations, I think, for a basic structure for moving forward with an economic development plan. I appreciate the information about budget needs, which we'll be looking at closely in the coming month or so. But I think I like the architecture of where you want to direct the department's efforts, and investment in those areas, I think, first quick look, seem to be the kind of wise investments we should be making that will have a return on investment, both in terms of revenues for the city and job creation and economic impact. So I congratulate you on this, and looking forward to diving into it a little further.
Great. I'm looking forward to getting deeper with you.
We really appreciate your testimony. I think certainly the blueprint is emerging, and I think we're all excited about what the possibilities are. This matter was first raised by Councilman Weezar, who's not with us today, but I want to give Jessica McLean from his office a chance to make some comments if she chooses to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jessica Wethington McLean on behalf of Council Member Jose Weezar, who was unfortunately unable to be here today. We've been greatly anticipating the report coming on this motion, as actually most of you will understand, when CRA was lost, so there too went an enormous resource for the districts that the council member and many of you also represent. Thus far, the city has brought in $148 million of those dollars that have not been targeted to economic development, have not been targeted to affordable housing, have not been targeted to the areas that would have benefited by the CRA dollars. We're anticipating, based on the report from the department, $30 million a year coming in those revenues on an annual basis. So the question that I think sits before the decision makers right now and going forward and is what we hope to get in the next report are specific options. What can the department do with this $30 million a year? What can they do with all of it? What can they do with some of it? What can they do with none of it? And those are really the decisions that the policymakers are going to have to make about how to use these dollars, whether economic development is the priority or other things that, obviously we have general fund issues that we all have to deal with. Specific to this report, a timeline would be great to have. When can these things be achieved? It's a great 50,000 feet in the air report about sort of the blueprint, as you said, for getting things done. What's the timeline for delivering these specific things, and how is that timeline linked to the amount of funding? In many ways right now, economic development in the city of Los Angeles is a bit of an unfunded mandate. We all know we need it. We all know we want it. We've developed a department, but we haven't really given them the seed money or even beyond seed money, the actual physical and important money to be able to deliver on that desire. So specific to this report, the council member was interested in the sectors idea, sort of how do we recruit sectors of business? Are there incentive programs that we can develop for specific sectors? The historic core, for instance, and downtown is seeming to get a lot of interest in the high-tech industries. But we're struggling with how do we get fiber to those buildings, that they need the huge bandwidth that fiber delivers. So there's sort of those questions about how do we attract a sector. It's really about how do we build the infrastructure necessary to attract the sector. And then it sort of layers on top of that. Also, the geographic focus makes a lot of sense to us in terms of, for instance, the arts district downtown. The smokestacks are gone, but we have a huge opportunity for job growth and mixed use down there. If we can find some creative ways to really sort of focus geographically there, mix the uses, and make use of that building stock, we have an enormous opportunity in that area, as well as so many other areas of the city where the same things have happened. And then speaking of geography, just sort of the question that Ms. Martinez very astutely asked, which was how are we dealing with the bonds that were in each of our CRA areas and the proceeds thereof. I think also beyond bonds, how are we dealing with the areas? Obviously, we need an economic development strategy for the whole city, but the CRA areas in particular might need some extra support. And what is the recommendation of the department of how to achieve that, and with what revenue? And that's really sort of where we were going, sort of timeline, options, and how are all of those options linked to the budget?
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate Councilman Weezar's leadership and interest in this issue. And I think as we've seen, the blueprint is emerging. We're going to ask the general manager to come back with some more details, talking about a timeline, talking about some specific options so that we can move forward. And so we do appreciate your comments.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Do we have any other cards? Any general public comments? We've got anyone? None? Sid? Again?
Thank you again. As I indicated in my prior comments, I will just elaborate a little bit more onto it, is that it is essential, whatever that this committee can do, especially District 14, to look at the matter of the alley or the court in an economic point of view, because this is just not about two groups of people, Delson Investment and LA United. This is more than those two entities. This is about a family of business people, restaurants, who need to survive. And if it has to say anything about this panel here, which day in and day out you exhaust a lot of man-hour to create opportunities for small businesses, this is going on the contrary, where we do have a district leader. And I say that with respect. I consider him a friend, I consider him a good person, but also he's got a huge district to deal with.
Yeah, may I interrupt? Since he already spoke on item 1 on this.
This is a general comment.
As a public speaker, and we deemed it as part of the nonprofit.
Okay.
It's really not an item of within the general jurisdiction of the city. That's not on agenda because we deemed it to be on the agenda. So, I mean, it's really up to the discretion of the chair.
So can you summarize your comments?
Well, I asked them prior to make these comments. They gave me the okay to do it on both. Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, wait, so
That's
we'll
fine.
let you talk, but it's going to be one.
What I asked this panel is that, because every time that I bring this subject matter up, is that the silence is deafening from the district, because they keep imposing that it is between parties. This is not about parties. This is about a backyard that needs to be done right. And the prudent thing is that when the leadership starts getting involved personally and try to put a hand, helping hand, we could move this ball forward for the benefit of all.
All right.
And I thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And with that, thank you all for your attendance and participation. This meeting is adjourned.